So welcome, gentlemen. We're honored to have you. I'd like to also welcome back Gerald. I think we've missed him for several weeks as he's convalesced from his illness with COVID. So Gerald, welcome back to the broadcast. We're glad to have you.
I'm just busy with work, Bill. I wasn't sick.
Okay. We're still glad to have you back.
Thank
you. Okay. I hope everybody saw Mandy's note this morning that spoke about Alan Jackson and his work all year long on our video, and know that that will be coming out soon. And I want to take an opportunity to thank Alan for all he has done for this club, not just this year, but every year, past president, but the advertisement that we placed in Sunday's paper, everything that he has done for us, and Mandy's help with that. So thanks to everybody. I wanted to let you know that our board will have its last meeting with me at the Reigns this Thursday at noon. It will be a Zoom meeting, of course. And finally, before I introduce our speaker, and I'm thrilled to have arranged for him to join us, I want to wish everybody in the month of June, one more time, and in Peter's case today, but everybody a happy Caprosi, Will Eckert, Alan Jackson, Rebecca Traylor, Lee Young, Peter Nelson's is today, Jeff Mackey's is Sunday, Angela Chapman's is Monday, and to wind down the month, Bill Kopp and Ron Swift have birthdays next Tuesday when we will not be convening. So all you Rotarians with June birthdays, one more time, happy birthday. Now, if I could, I would like to introduce our speaker, and I see him at the bottom with a facial hair. Looks good. Chief Thurman Whisnant is a native of Hickory, and his police career with the Hickory Police Department began in 1994 after he graduated from ASU. He completed an internship, and since that time, he has had various roles, including patrol officer, criminal investigator, supervisor in the Edward Pact, commander in the David Pact, as well as commanding the Special Operations Team. Chief Whisnant has served as a division commander since 2006 and commanded each of the 3 divisions: criminal investigations, support services, and the patrol division. He served as deputy chief of police after being appointed and assumed the role as our chief of police in July of 2016. He is a graduate of the 230th session of the FBI National Academy. He's also been on the board of Exodus Homes, the Catawba County Child Fatality Prevention Team, and is currently a board member of the Child Advocacy and Protection Center, and is a member of the Western Catawba County Kiwanis Club. It is my honor to introduce to all of you Chief Thurman Whisnant.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me. I'll start off by saying, so it's an interesting time, to say the least, to be wearing a police uniform nowadays, as you all well know. So I thought, well, first of all, how much? What's my time limit?
I've got all afternoon.
Oh, okay.
We usually adjourn by 1 o'clock.
Okay. So anyway, I thought I would just come today. You know, there's plenty to talk about, but I thought what I would do today, in light of kind of with everything going on, you know, from COVID to you know, the recent incidents with George Floyd and the incident in Atlanta, and resulting from some use of force incidents, and just kind of talk about kind of the state of policing in Hickory. And so what are we doing here? What have we done here? And kind of what does all this mean for us going forward? And how does all this affect us? And So I thought I would kind of do that, but I also want to leave time for questions. I've had a whole lot of questions, as you can imagine, over the last few weeks. We've been really busy. But all in all, I'll start off by saying this. I feel very blessed to have started a career, still be in my career here in Hickory, North Carolina. I think, as you know, it's a challenging time for police right now. But having said that, there is nowhere else in the country or in the state that I would rather be at this moment, and that's a credit, to the fine men and women that I'm fortunate enough to lead here in Hickory. But it's also a credit to the fine community that we have. We have a very diverse community here, and I'll start off by saying I think maybe Chief Lucas is here, but so when I started here as a baby cop in 1994, and even as a young intern, we were exploring a brand new philosophy. At that time, it was brand new to Hickory, and it was called community policing. And so I started out, and I'm glad to say that I'm in a position now where it's really all that I've ever known. And in times like this, you can see the benefits and the importance of a community policing philosophy and how all that plays out. So for years and years, we have worked on building trust, building relationship, and kind of what I would call making deposits into the community policing bank. And it's times like these where even though it involves an incident that was 1,000 miles away that we had nothing to do with, in some regard, we're kind of sort of making a withdrawal, I think, now from our community policing bank, where you see the benefits and the importance of those relationships that we've built throughout our community, with our residents, with our business owners throughout the years. So basically, just to kind of talk a little bit about that, believe it or not, there are still agencies across the country, and I'm shocked when I hear it, who I hear things when I'm at some of my chiefs conferences, and they say, well, we're going to explore this philosophy of community policing, and we're going to try to build trust and relationships. And, the first thing I'll say is you can't wait till something bad happens to start building relationships and building partnerships. That's a continual process that goes on for years and years. And I have been have kind of assumed the reins of that philosophy from both of my predecessors who have been very committed to that. So we are a non-traditional police department, the Hickory Police Department. Not everybody, when we look at our hiring process, and when we try to recruit and look for folks who are a good fit, not everyone is a good fit for the Hickory Police Department. We look for everybody that comes here. We want them to have leadership ability. We want them to have communication skills and all the things. You hear a lot of folks refer to our profession as law enforcement. You won't hear me refer to our profession as law enforcement a lot. And of course, that is a role we have, but law enforcement is one tool that we have in our policing profession. And so you'll hear me talk a lot about policing. One of the things that I've seen change a lot over the years is just how the things that we respond to and the problems that we deal with. Problem solving is really what we do, and law enforcement is one tool in problem solving. But if you really think about it, there are many, many, many tools. And, if we go out and, that's the only hammer we have in our tool bag is law enforcement, and we don't ever try any other tool than that, then we're not going to be very successful. We're going to be successful a very limited amount of time. So what we try to do is look for what are the causes of some of the problems that we encounter. Many times they're crimes, but many times, and in fact, most times they're not crimes that we respond to. And so, somebody asked me last week and said, and not that they were pushing for this here, but you've heard the notion of we're going to defund the police. We want to defund the police. And somebody asked, had there been any discussion of that here? And I said, well, no. And they kind of said, well, how do you feel about that? And I said, well, you know, in essence, what I've seen over my 26, 27 years at the police department is we've seen other areas of government kind of sort of get defunded. We've seen a mental health system that has changed, substance abuse, all those things, you know, that lead to things that we deal with that are social issues. We deal with many folks who are experiencing mental health crisis. We deal with a lot of folks who homelessness, all those things where mental health, substance abuse plays into that, where it's really a lot of social issues that we're dealing with. So as other areas have in essence been defunded over the years by default, I think a lot of those problems have kind of fallen at the feet of police. We're the branch of government that's out there 24/7. We're the most visible branch of government, and we kind of pick up where all other things fail. So we are in a tough situation. We know that. It's what we signed up for, but we've had to adapt in kind of years. But I think that having a philosophy of community policing has helped our agency maybe adapt a little easier or better in those type situations than maybe some other agencies around the country. So our core values are on our patch, and they are professionalism, accountability, compassion, and teamwork. Everything we do should fit into one, if not all of those categories. If it doesn't, I tell my folks, if whatever you're doing doesn't somehow fit into one or all of those categories, we need to be doing something else, because we're wasting our time. We're not doing anything that's helping ourselves or helping the public. So everything we do, from our performance reviews to our commendations, to our, you know, disciplinary actions, which are rare, everything falls into those 4 areas of our core values. Those were developed by a team of staff over many meetings at the Hickory Police Department. Those came about kind of after our development of our community policing philosophy, but it kind of falls right into that. So just to kind of roll into, you know, some of the things that we're, you know, aside from the COVID and all those things that have kind of brought a whole new set of things to us and challenges with governor's orders to things like that, but also just some of the questions. I'll kind of hit some of the questions that I've had recently with regard to kind of what you're seeing. I think we would all agree that what happened in Minneapolis, you know, is not what any law enforcement officer who's doing the right things would stand for. It would, that, you know, an act like that would be in violation of our policy in several different areas, and unlawful. So, but unfortunately, we knew instantly when we saw that that our jobs, you know, our job in some regard had gotten tougher. And I think any officers anywhere in the country would agree with that. So, however, we've had several meetings. We meet routinely with our leaders throughout our community, and you know, it's we're very blessed here. We've had relationships. One of the things really going back to that started just before I stepped into the role as chief of police, started when Chief Atkins was there. We twice a month, we're part of a group called the Racial Reconciliation and Discussion Group. And I got involved with that group just before stepping into the chief's role. And if you remember, around that time, it was post-Ferguson, but right around the time where there was some incidents and some of the Charlotte riots were going on. And we started kind of using that with our community leaders to say, you know, what would we do here? What would we do? How would we avoid that situation in Hickory, to kind of take that and learn from that? And since then, literally every meeting, me or someone from my command staff, we meet every second and fourth Wednesday from 10 to 11:30 with a group of community leaders. Our group has actually gotten bigger, but we have a lot of discussions. I've learned a lot. There are faith leaders. There are leadership from the NAACP. We have leaders from other areas of government. I know Mayor Guest attends that fairly regularly. and we discuss hard issues. And I think we've learned a lot from one another. I think that a lot of the community leaders have learned a lot about police and what we stand for. And we've learned a lot, I think, about, folks who are a different race or who are different from us, different gender or whatever. And I think each of us in our disciplines take those things. And although we're not really an action group, so to speak, I think it's key the leadership in that organization kind of takes those things and injects it back into the culture of their disciplines, of their organizations. And so when rough times like this happen, we kind of have a head start. We're not immune from an incident here in Hickory, and we know that, but we're working very hard to try to build those trusts, build those relationships, and have those in place well before any bad incidents. And we'll continue to pray that that doesn't happen. And we're constantly here, reviewing, our policies, our training, and things of that nature. So, a lot of the things that you see, and I'll just kind of say this, nationwide. So in North Carolina, I think one thing that's really significant that you don't hear a lot of discussion about in the media, I've heard a little bit recently with this, but in North Carolina, there is by statute, there's no collective bargaining by public sector employees. So we don't have any police unions. We don't have, really anything that if we were to have an incident for example, at the Hickory Police Department, if we go to great lengths and we have an extensive hiring process that takes about 6 weeks. It involves a background check. It involves polygraph, psychological examinations. I mean, we send somebody out to talk to folks who maybe they're teachers all the way back to 8th grade. We develop, who have done hiring. Sometimes you do, the absolute best you can do. And then you find at some point, hopefully soon, that maybe that person is not a good fit for your organization for whatever reason. Here in North Carolina, we don't have any kind of union contracts that would be an obstacle for me or any of my supervisors to take action. In many other states, that has been a barrier. And I think a lot of what we see, or I feel like a lot of times we see these incidents that, we know would be very, very unlikely to happen here, yet they happen other places. Or, and I think one of the things you've seen in Minneapolis, one of the questions is, how did this officer that obviously did this thing that was, completely wrong, he'd been there for a number of years, and it appears that he had all these, prior complaints or disciplinary actions with no action being taken. And I think a lot of that is due to a lot of states that have those places in those union contracts in place that make it very difficult for agencies or command staffs to address those issues. And that's a tough spot. And I hope we don't ever have that situation here, but we do, when something like this happens, feel the effects of that nationwide. So we have a state level oversight board in North Carolina. Our law enforcement certification comes from the North Carolina Criminal Justice Training and Standards Commission. They have investigators, and they have the ability to revoke a certification. Even if an agency doesn't address it, given certain things, they have the ability to do that. So we really have, overall, a fairly good system in North Carolina that is set up to keep the professionalism of policing at a top level. I would personally like to see that when we talk about police reform, I would like to see some standardization. I think some common sense reform in policing would be some standardization of things like that across the nation. So a couple highlights here. I've had a lot of questions recently about policies, and you hear a lot about, a duty to intercede, where officers are they required to step in and stop an excessive use of force. We've had a duty to intercede policy ever since I've been here. For example, So the other thing you hear a lot about is, there's, I think, a movement for some reform to standardize policies dealing with use of force with regard to choke holds or carotid holds. We have had that policy already in place. And so a lot of the things that you see or hear that are being, we already have those. We actually contract with a company called Lexipol. They're a professional risk management company, and they actually keep up with the latest Supreme Court rulings, best practices and laws. And we have they manage our policy manual, and they send us updates. We can send out immediate policy changes, and the officers actually can access current policy right on their smartphones. And actually, they get tested on it. They do what's called training bulletins. And so monthly, they have a certain number of questions related to policy that they get tested on. So, so we're doing a lot of things. One of the most significant things that we have done here, that we were one of the first in North Carolina to do, was to have full implementation, department-wide implementation of body-worn cameras. We had actually signed the contract to do that before the incident happened in Ferguson. So we started that in 2014, and we have closely tracked our use of force incidents both before and after to see if that had an effect. And I will tell you that body cameras are fairly expensive. They're not perfect, but they're a great tool, because before we had in-car cameras, and what we found is that we only captured about 10% of what interactions an officer has during the course of a day, and it had to happen right in front of the hood of their police car. So all of our officers now have body-worn cameras when they're in uniform. They're required to record any work-related interaction. I mean, they don't have to record when they're just going to lunch or maybe in their car riding around, but whenever they have a work-related interaction, they're required to record. We have unlimited storage. As I said, it's fairly expensive. I think our current contract for storage cameras and everything is a little over $100,000 a year, but it's well worth it. The officers see it as a tool to protect them. But when you talk about how has that affected our use of force, when we looked at the 4 years prior and then the 4 years after our implementation of body cameras, we had a 50.4% reduction in use of force incidents. And so the question I get with that is, well, are officers using less force because they know that they're being recorded? And my response is, well, cameras change behavior. A use of force is reactionary. So we're reacting to what someone that we're interacting with, we're reacting to that. So when people know they're being recorded, it changes behavior. So I would say everything is affected by that. When we tested our cameras, one of the things that was a great selling point to me is we had 3 officers that actually tested them for a period of time. And when I was watching one of the videos, one of our officers during the testing phase had a gentleman in the booking area who was placed. He wasn't resisting, but he wasn't being very nice. He was making some colorful comments and telling the officer all about his family and everything, as you can imagine. And so finally he asked a question. He asked the officer, "What is that little thing on your shoulder?" And the officer said, "Well, that's a camera. You're being recorded." And immediately his behavior changed. He was polite, and just his demeanor completely changed. And so that was one of the key moments that was a great selling point for us. Our goal is to not have to use force. So when you look at statistically, I think nowadays, if you watch the news, unfortunately, as many of you know, things can be kind of taken out of context. And I hear a lot from a lot of people that, well, gosh, force is just a thing that is prevalent. We use force all the time, and it happens daily. The reality is that's not true. So we look at that regularly. And when you look at our use of force, it is kind of a rare event. And I'm not talking about deadly force. I'm talking about any amount of force, anything beyond just standard handcuffing. And what does that tell me? That tells me that most interactions that we have are friendly and cordial, even in an enforcement situation. And that, again, that's a credit to us and our training, and it's a credit to our citizens, who most people are polite, even in a situation where there's an enforcement action. But at Hickory, even if someone were arrested, we've looked at several years of statistics. Statistically, even in an arrest situation, less than 1% of the time is there any amount of force used above standard handcuffing. When you look at the number of calls for service that we have in Hickory and the number of interactions that officers interact with people, when you look at the number of officers, the amount of force used, and the calls for service we have, the probability of a call ending up in any amount of use of force in Hickory, North Carolina is 0.019%, to put things in perspective. So, we are humans. We're in a human business and we're interacting with humans. And by the nature of what we do, I don't know how much more we could lessen that. Our goal is to do that, but it is an extremely rare thing. And that's just something that you're not hearing a lot about, those facts, when at least now, by the mainstream media. But I do think that's important. So I've got some more things, but I'll pause right here and ask, does anybody have any questions so far about anything?
I do.
Okay.
I've got a question for you. Out of that 0.019%, how many of those people are actually sober? Have you guys done a test on that?
We have not looked at that, and I'll speculate. I will say that a lot of people that we deal with in those are under the influence of alcohol or some kind of drugs. I will say, I'll tell you this, alcohol is still the #1 abused drug ever. So that does play a role in many of the ones that I have seen. That's a great question. And we do need to look at that, but I would say it would be a fair amount of those. Yes.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It seems like you really have your act together in terms of the policies and the body cameras. Why do the other Minneapolis and all these major police departments that don't have that?
Well, that's a great question, and it kind of goes back to, again, I'm somewhat speculating. I do know that a lot of other states and bigger cities, police unions are prevalent, and they're very powerful, and they come in and they have input in policy development, they have input in disciplinary actions, and it's just it's unfortunate because, as you know now, every officer across the nation, from Hickory to Los Angeles or whatever, by the media, like many things, not just us, but we're all getting painted with the same brush. I actually saw a great, it was in Hickory Daily Record. It was one of the cartoons, and it was a big paintbrush, and it said all police officers. And so anyway, and it's the nature of the business. I think that, you can have, a few bad actors in a profession that I know in North Carolina, there's almost 20,000 police officers just in North Carolina. I don't even begin to know. I think there's over 17 some odd thousand police departments across the nation who, in some regard have different policies and different philosophies. But when something bad happens, we all get painted with the same brush. But I do think that, just from some of my experience in talking to other police leadership when I was at the FBI National Academy, and just heard some of the obstacles to holding officers accountable that leaders have in those areas where they have to negotiate with police unions, it's a challenge. And we don't have that here. And I hope we never do. I will tell you that some of the harshest comments and criticisms that I heard following the George Floyd incident was from some of my own staff, because they knew how hard their job just got from something they had nothing to do with and a philosophy we don't support. So that's kind of the I guess the part that's a little bit frustrating for me. But again, we're blessed here. We have a great relationship with our community. you know, for example, so I don't know if anybody was there or kept up with the protest, the first protest that we had outside of City Hall. I think it was 2 weeks ago, and there was a large number of people there, very diverse crowd. We had no incidents. We had folks, you know, holding signs that, you know, they were critical of the policing profession. And some of those same folks were telling me, hey, this is not directed at you here. So, you know, to me, that was a good gauge of, you know, hey, you know, we understand that, you know, there are folks that are frustrated and we're frustrated. But you know, it also reaffirmed the importance of how important that we continue with our philosophy, and we worked extra hard to do what we do and stand for what we stand for. But I do think it's important also, you know, when some non-factual information or maybe, you know, something that's taken out of context gets out there, I do try to, you know, get accurate facts out there, and we're open to input too. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thurman?
And I have I just had not necessarily a question, but a comment to make. And it's, of course, I had the pleasure of really getting to know you better when I was on the Community Relations Council for several years, which was just such a wonderful eye-opener for me to see what really goes on in this community with regard to really, you know, being out in front of some of this stuff that happens and how difficult your job is. You know, I've been one of your biggest supporters and cheerleaders of not only you, but the police force. But just this whole, the fact that you are communicating to us, and I know that you have done that a lot, I think just makes so much difference. I mean, probably a lot of people here didn't know, maybe until even today, or there are a lot of people out there that don't know that most of your job is not about the use of force, and it's about this building of relationships in the community. And so I just wanted to say that I really so much admire the work you've done. Of course, you've had a great heritage of some following in the footsteps of some other people we've got to know really well in our club as well. But yeah, I just keep up the good work.
Well, thank you. And that's a great segue, I think, into, you know, one of the things, you know, that we think is important and we value here. You know, it's not our goal. You know, our goal, if we can prevent crime, well, that's better than having to investigate a crime and charge someone and go that whole route. So we do a lot of programs and things that are, again, non-traditional, and you know, just to highlight a few of those, some of you may have heard, you know, we so for example, our nationwide opioid epidemic. So we kind of got, again, this is kind of correcting some false information, but some of you may have heard that we got misbranded through some that we were the 5th worst city for opioid abuse. I will tell you that's not true, but even still, there was just a little bit about that. There was a for-profit data analytics company that did some research just in the southeastern U.S. and had some not great research methods. They kind of came up with that, and after the headlines were out, we kind of questioned them a little bit about it. They said, well, yeah, what we should have said is we have the potential to be. But when you look at our overdoses and things like that, there's a national problem, but our overdose problem is about right in line with where you would expect our county to be, you know, based on the population in North Carolina. So, and actually, that's, you know, we still deal with things like methamphetamine and all those things. And, but aside from that, we said, okay, well, regardless, you know, there is this perception and there is a problem nationwide. So what can we do about this? So we researched several different programs, harm reduction programs, in essence, jail diversion programs, because we realized that, you know, if someone is addicted, if they're truly addicted, they are going to do whatever it takes to feed the addiction. If that means, you know, committing crimes, whatever. And if we don't address the underlying cause of the problem, then again, if we keep using the law enforcement tool, then we're probably just going to keep going out responded to the same call with the same person. So we found this program called LEAD, Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. And it's a program where we partnered with Partners Behavioral Health. They hired a case manager. And when we identify someone, for example, that, okay, well, all of a sudden this person in the last 6 months, we've dealt with them 3 times. They've started shoplifting and doing these other things. And obviously they are doing this to support some kind of drug habit, whether it be, opioids, methamphetamine, whatever. But they're addicted. And so we know that if we don't address the addiction, we're going to continue to deal with this person and it's going to get worse and worse. So what can we do? So we have this program and we worked it out, and actually it's a countywide program now. The sheriff's office and all the agencies in Catawba County are on board and work with Partners Behavioral Health. And we have monthly meetings, we have a board, and we've got a community organization that also helps fund the case manager position. But in essence, what happens is if an officer identifies somebody, they have the ability, now they can't be a sex offender or a violent offender or anything like that. We've got a protocol. But if it's a low-level offender, the officer has the discretion to say, okay, you are a candidate for our LEAD program. So right now today, it may be out on the roadside at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, here you are and I've caught you with this. I can arrest you right now, or you can agree to go right this moment. We're going to call a case manager out here and a case management team, a crisis team, and you agree to go right this minute into treatment. And if you do these X number of things, then we won't pursue this charge. If you don't do these things, then we'll pull the evidence back out and we'll institute the charge. And so we've done that for a little over, we're getting close to 2 years now. And of the people that have opted to go into the LEAD program, right at 80% of them we have never seen in the criminal justice system again. So actually Duke University has given us money and they're actually studying our program now. So that's a great example of really a social issue that kind of leads to crime, but what can we do that's non-traditional really to try to solve the problem, to save money to our taxpayers, from jail space to us continuing to respond out. What can we do to reduce that? We also just hired, in essence, a social worker. So we hired Casey McCall, who is now in charge of our Community Navigator program, because we deal with issues related to homelessness, which just about everyone we deal with, only that police deal with homelessness, there's usually an underlying substance abuse or mental health issue. And our officers were finding that, we need somebody that can maybe be a navigator to help that person get connected to services. What can we do, to see if we can get this person off the street, address some of those underlying issues or obstacles that are preventing them from being successful. And we've had, now I will tell you, that's a challenging thing. And sometimes, not everybody, is easy to deal with in that regard, but we have had some success in that. We've actually been able to get some folks housed. We've been able to get some folks employed. So we're doing a whole lot of things now in the policing business that had you asked me, we're actually carrying an overdose reversal drug. All of our officers carry a drug. And if they get out with somebody who, an EMS or fire department is not there yet, we can administer an overdose reversal drug. So we're doing a whole lot of things right now that had you asked me 25 years ago, I would have said that's not a police issue. So I think that's probably happening nationwide too, in different regard, different levels. But it's just a very challenging profession that we're in right now. And I think a lot of folks don't really understand the magnitude and just the vast array of issues that we are dealing with on a day-to-day basis in this profession. So,
Thurman, would you do me a favor?
Mm-hmm.
When we talked a couple weeks ago, just before the protest,
yeah,
you and I talked about I'm going to say it's an academy, but I don't think that's the right word, but it's the policing event that takes place.
Academy? Was it said? Yeah, so we have that's one of our outreach areas as well, and started when Chief Lucas was here. We do what's called a Citizens Police Academy. Unfortunately, we had to cancel what would have been our 43rd session due to COVID. I say cancel, I would say it's more on hold, but it is a 10-week program that's open to all citizens. You don't even have to live in Hickory. It's open to anyone. And what we do is it's Thursday nights from 6 to 8. The first night I come in and I talk about, our philosophy and how community policing came to be. And then the next 8 nights, you get instruction and hands-on, in-depth look at our department from a whole bunch of highly motivated leaders within the department, from our narcotics unit to communications. We have a 24/7 911 communication center. And you learn about all the things that you probably didn't think about that goes into running a police department, and basically what it takes to get a call for service, dispatch to an officer, and all the equipment and all the things that it takes to make us successful, to be great problem solvers. And you get to hear a lot of good stories. You get to ride along with our police officers a few times. If we're having driver's training, during that same time, you may even get to come out and go through our driving course with us. That seems to be a favorite. You get to see our police canines, our tactical team, and then we finish it off with a great meal and a graduation and a class photo. And so this would have been our 43rd. Our next one will be our 43rd session, and we would love to have you join us if you haven't thought about that. So just keep checking our Facebook page, and as soon as we can get through the COVID, we'll be right back in the swing of things with that. So
Thank you.
yeah. All right. I'm trying to think. Does anybody have any other questions? And so just a little. One of the other questions that I get a lot is, what are our department demographics? I mean, obviously, one of the things that we want to do is we want to be representative with regard to our demographic breakdown. We want to mirror the community that we serve, and we do. I would say I would give us a grade of fair in that. We want to do better. It's very difficult. We don't see a whole lot of applicants, minority applicants. We work really hard to try to get recruit minority applicants, but we just don't see a lot. I'm not optimistic that the current state of the country is really going to help our recruitment situation overall. And maybe even more, might hurt us a little more even with our minority applicants. But right now, so we have civilian and sworn staff here. We have some full and some part-time. So currently, we have 160 employees. Now, that includes police officers, telecommunicators, record staff, even school crossing guards. So out of the 160, we have 25 of our staff are minority, with 10% being African American. So that is a little bit below what the match would be for Hickory demographics, but we're continually working on that. But I can tell you, we're probably, if you were to compare us to other police departments, we could all do better, but we're probably doing better than a lot of the other police departments. But we always our goal is to match our community. Training wise, I get a lot of questions about training. What do we do to train? You hear a lot about de-escalation. So our use of force policy basically says whatever force we use has to be the minimum amount necessary to accomplish our lawful purpose, and immediately, when you can, you have to de-escalate. De-escalation for us really starts before force is used. And so we're using de-escalation tactics, maybe as soon as we arrive at the scene of a domestic and two people are arguing with one another and we're trying to calm them down. our officers are trained in that. And especially, we talked about now we're dealing with a lot of mental health, folks in mental health crisis, substance abuse crisis. All of our officers early on in their careers go through a 40-hour crisis intervention training. It has scenarios that teaches them how to effectively communicate and de-escalate situations, hopefully so that you don't have to use force at all. But even when we do use the force, we teach, using good verbal commands and de-escalation strategies. We are the first agency in North Carolina. I went to a year and a half ago, or 2 years ago, went to an International Association of Chiefs of Police conference. And I know Chief Lucas knows what I'm talking about, but you're talking about probably 20,000 people from I don't know how many different countries who are police leaders from across the world. It's almost overwhelming. There's such a vast number of people from all over the place there, but it's a great networking, and it's a great place to learn what are the latest strategies, best practices. And so I went to a breakout session there, and there was the Department of Justice was introducing a program called Blue Courage. And I was kind of intrigued by it because it was one of the things that I have noticed, especially later in my career, is I think, as a leader in the profession, I think we've always done good ever since I've been in the profession at saying, okay, this is how to be safe as a police officer. This is how to search a building safely. This is how to stop a car safely. And we didn't always do a great job with, our physical well-being, eating right, staying fit. We've done better at that over the last 15 years. But the one area then I think that's still lacking, especially with our younger generation, which is the majority of our young folks that are out in uniform right now that are in their early 20s. It's the Generation Y or the Generation Z or what they may call it. But so they have not been through, what we're seeing is they've not been through a lot of adversity. And so they're going to have adversity day one on the job as a police officer. And we're already kind of dealing with recruitment retention issues. And so I kind of saw that there needed to be some way, some resiliency course to help our young staff in the way of mind, body, and spirit, how to deal with adversity, how to make good decisions. For example, there's you may have something that's lawful. There may be an incident that's a use of force that is, it's lawful to do this, but is that the best way to handle it? How do you teach a young police officer that's 21 or 22 years old who's just getting overwhelmed with information on the law and search and seizure and all those things? How do you teach them that they have options? How do you teach them good discretion to make good decisions? Well, this program, Blue Courage, was exactly that. And so I checked into it, and I found out that to get instructors here to teach our department, it was about $16,000 that I didn't have in my budget. So after about a year, I found an opportunity to apply for a federal grant, and we actually got it. And so we were the first and only agency. We have 4 instructors now, and our entire department goes through this Blue Courage program. And it basically is an organizational culture, officer wellness, decision-making framework, just how to have a successful career and how to handle adversity. And we've had probably more positive comments about that course than any course I can remember in my career here. And I think a lot of folks come into it thinking, what in the world is this they're making me go to? And at the end of the 2 days, you'll hear best class I've ever been to. And so that's another thing that we're doing that I think is not directly aimed at any of the problems we're seeing, but maybe one of the best solutions that I've seen is just, our young folks now really have a tough job, and it's tougher than it was when I was 22 or 23 years old answering calls. I think that, the public, the media, just the visual society that we're in now, has the expectation that our young police officers make decisions when they've been there a year. They're expected to make a decision, like I might make, or somebody who's been in it 25 plus years. And that's where the bar is now. And they know that, and they know that's what they've signed up for. And so we're trying to do everything that we can do in the way of not just standard training, but also those type trainings and just preparations to how to deal with those adversity type things.
Chief,
Yes.
a good way to end up today might be if you would real quick hit on the core values of the police department. I know that they're professionalism, accountability, compassion, and teamwork. So I know that that's the core values that you instill in all the officers at the Hickory Police Department. So that might be a good way to wrap up with today.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly right. Thank you, Mayor. And it's so important to us that we put it on our patch in 2017. So I would venture to say if you ask any police officer out on the street and you stop and you quiz them and say, what are our core values? I'd be shocked if they didn't know what their organizational core values are, because that's what we continually instill. And so yeah, professionalism, accountability, compassion, and teamwork. And each of those has kind of an external and an internal component. You know, teamwork, for example, we want to be involved in teamwork by building relationships with our community. And we want to teamwork with regard to collaboration with our other agencies, teamwork, working together internally, compassion. That speaks for itself. I think we're in a time when, just having that understanding of, there is being right and then there's doing what is right. Our goal is not to be right. Our goal is to do the right thing. And so we talk a lot about that. That's a big piece of the Blue Courage course that I talked about. That course goes hand in hand. Obviously, professionalism, speaks for itself. That kind of covers our training, what our philosophy is, how we conduct ourselves. And then accountability. Each of our officers understands, do we discipline our officers? Absolutely we do. Is it done in a way that, I would call it more of a corrective action? I think, all of us at times, need to be corrected. That's part of, I think the beginning side of that is mentoring. So we focus a lot with our seasoned staff of, spending a lot of time mentoring our younger officers. That's kind of the front lines of accountability and just creating that good organizational culture. We can have all the training that we want, but really I think the thing that gives me the most comfort in my role, I know at the end of the day that as a chief of police, we're not immune to some sort of bad or tragic incident. And when I think what is the best thing that I can do, because the buck stops with me, the public holds me accountable, for at the end of the day, for what our philosophy is and our success or our failure. And I really believe that the best thing that we can do is have a good organizational culture and really live, not just know it, really live what our core values are. It's a dangerous time we're in. I'll say this real quick before I end. I was looking, I keep up with, the officer injuries and line of death. So in 2019, there was 147 officers killed in the line of duty nationwide. This year, we're not even halfway through the year. There's already been 110 line of duty deaths. So you're not hearing a lot about that in the media right now, with everything that's kind of going on. But I think it has the potential to be a volatile time. We understand that, but we also understand that our community needs us now more than ever. We know that we're appreciated and we're very blessed and fortunate. I know I am, and I know my staff is, to be serving here. I think we've had lunch brought in from a community member virtually every day this week. So I feel like we are in the place to be right now when wearing a uniform. And so it's a credit to our community, and you don't know how much that means. And our officers, they know it and they see it. And that's what keeps us going. So we appreciate it. And that's all I have, unless someone has any other questions.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Oh, go ahead.
No, well, I just wanted to echo what Catherine Newton said, Chief Whisnant. I may or may not have been at the protest a few weeks ago in one of those masks, and I was truly impressed by how your folks handled that whole situation. And actually one of the organizers of the protest recognized and said, you know, we're very lucky in Hickory. Our police officers are pretty good. And so that was really nice to hear. And also your comments that and response to the questions at the vigil that was held the other week also. So just thank you for what you do and all of your team.
Oh, well, thank you.
Okay, so if this is too much, just let me know. So my first question is about the unions you had mentioned.
Yeah.
Are you saying that you believe that cops nationwide should not be allowed to unionize? Is that kind of where you stand?
Well, so we don't have them here. I never really knew a whole lot about that until I went to the National Academy, where I was with some other leaders who talked about some of the problems that followed, specifically with regard, I think, to some of the things that have been negotiated, where it really kind of makes this, it's counterproductive in my mind to community policing first. And the other thing it does is it really makes it difficult for officers who need to be held accountable to be held accountable. So it was kind of an eye-opening thing to be exposed to some of that from some colleagues in other states. So I think just from what I know about it, I would reform. Here's some reforms that I would like to see nationwide. I would like to see a standardization of maybe some policies, some best practice policies across the board, across the nation, across the state. I think we're very similar in North Carolina. We have a training and standards division here in North Carolina that kind of governs that. And you do have individual departmental policy, but I think in North Carolina you'll find we have a very active Chiefs Association here, and we work very closely together to try to kind of keep those things standardized. It changes when you go outside of North Carolina. Obviously laws change, but I think what I would like to see with regard to unions maybe is at least the piece where they have gotten so much control or so much influence that they've been able to negotiate things into, that blocks a department or a city or a chief's ability to hold an officer accountable. I was in class with a chief that we were on break, and we were kind of doing some scenarios one day in class. And he actually told me, as chief of police, he said, I'm held accountable. The buck stops with me, but I can't hire and fire my own people in his area. So that was something that was, and I, you're starting to see some of this discussion. I've heard the Minneapolis chief talk about it. But what happens is when you have those cultures, those environments, and I will still say that, I would say that Minneapolis Police Department, by and large, I don't know anybody there, but more than likely, the vast majority of their police officers are probably good people doing the right things. But, you have a few people that have just been empowered through lack of accountability. And then you have one incident like this, and everybody who's doing the right thing then pays for it. So I think that that's something, if there's some way nationwide or across the states that addresses that issue, I think we will all be better off, for those of us that are every day doing the right things for the right reasons, have good cultures. I think we're more at risk to these things happening again if in some way that gets missed when we have whatever reform is coming.
Great.
One more question?
Okay.
Nope. Just want to see if anybody else has a question. Thurman?
Yeah.
Really exceeded my expectations. This was absolutely wonderful. We're indebted to you. I hope you and your department officers and everybody else associated stays safe and healthy. It's been a real honor to get to meet you, at least visually. I appreciate that.
It's and I will speak for me, but I'll speak for our department too, because I know how our folks feel. Our morale is good. Everybody here that I talk to is still positive, and I think that's largely due to such a wonderful community that we serve in. And there's nowhere else that I'd want to do this. And we just appreciate the immense support that we get here, and it's an absolute honor for us to serve. And we're going to try to continue to get better and continue to do what we do. And we appreciate being in a partnership with all of you. So.
Thank you.
All right. Y'all take care.
Okay. Okay, folks, we do not meet next Tuesday. There's no meeting on June 30th, July the 7th. I'll turn the reins over to Lou, and we will have some sort of a virtual installation of your new president. I realized at the very end that we did not pledge to the flag. In my rush to welcome our guests, and John Leach, I know, was prepared to give an invocation. You got an old president. Anyway, folks, July the 7th, we will be on the air at noon. Y'all stay safe. I think this was an incredible program. I'm so proud of our police. Y'all take care, and we will close with the 4-way test of the things we think, say, or do. Is it the truth?
The truth.
Is it fair to all
All
concerned?
concerned.
Will it build
Build
goodwill and better
goodwill and better
friendships?
friendships.
Will it be beneficial to all
To all
concerned?
concerned.
Y'all stay safe.
Thank you.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, stay safe.